Good afternoon. The first item of business this afternoon is portfolio questions, and the first portfolio is indeed Constitution, External Affairs and Culture and Parliamentary Business. I remind members that questions 3 and 6 are grouped together, and therefore I'll take any supplementaries on these questions after both have been answered. And at question number 1, I call Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First of all, I want to apologise to the Chamber that I do have to leave midway through the session, as I previously indicated to the Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it provide an update on the Empire, Slavery and Scotland's Museum Steering Group and its work to consider Scotland's involvement in empire, colonialism and historic slavery, and how this can be addressed using museum collections and museum spaces, including the potential for a standalone slavery or human rights museum.
Cabinet Secretary Angus Robertson.
Presiding Officer, with your indulgence, may I begin by welcoming Dr Christopher Kalila, the Chair of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, the CPA, to our proceedings this afternoon. Dr Kalila is from Zambia, one of Scotland's partner countries. We're honoured that he is following these proceedings. Thank you. Turning to Mr McMillan's question, since publishing its recommendations in 2022, the Empire, Slavery and Scotland's Museum Steering Group has inspired significant action. Through the Delivering Change programme, Museums Galleries Scotland is supporting 17 museums, 97 sector professionals and has awarded £200,000 to 7 community partners. Over 300 people have received training. The Scottish Government also has committed £100,000 to establish a new organisation with its inaugural exhibition scheduled for the 1st of October. Museums Galleries Scotland also support repatriation, guidance, sector events and research directly addressing the call for systemic change and inclusive practice.
Stuart McMillan.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that reply. And bearing in mind that the recommendations made by the Empire, Slavery and Scotland's Museum Steering Group, does the Scottish Government still consider a standalone facility to be a viable option, and what discussions have the Scottish Government undertaken with companies to now own sugar processing and refining in these islands for them to engage with the history of the industry?
Cabinet Secretary.
Work towards the creation of a dedicated space will be for the leadership of the new organisation, and this includes determining the location. The Scottish Government encourages all individuals and organisations with historical links to colonialism and slavery, including those involved in sugar processing and refining, to engage meaningfully with their past. This is essential to ensure that any future representation of Scotland's role in the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism reflect the most accurate and inclusive picture possible.
And supplementary, Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary for an update on its work with museums to promote this anti-racist education and how this is being integrated into efforts to decolonise the curriculum in Scottish schools ahead of Black History Month? Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I begin, because it gives me an opportunity to do so, to pay tribute to Sir Geoff Palmer, who I know was a close friend of Faisal Chowdhury, and Professor Palmer played an outstanding role in the recent history of Scotland coming to terms with its past. I think it's really important that we learn the lessons of Scotland's history, that it is made relevant in our schools, and that we embrace the challenge, as we have done in my tenure, for example. We've seen, amongst other things, the return of a commemorative community pole to the Nisga'a people in British Columbia in Western Canada. That fits very much within my sense of embracing and understanding our past. I'd be happy to write to Mr Chowdhury with some more details, but I would wish to take the opportunity to put on record my appreciation to Professor Palmer, Mr Chowdhury's friend, who incidentally also served on the steering group in relation to Scotland's diaspora.
Question number 2, Daniel Johnson.
Ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the work of the Creative Industries Leadership Group.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Creative Industries Leadership Group works to articulate the needs and realise the potential of Scotland's creative industries, providing advice to ministers. I co-chaired a meeting of the Creative Industries Leadership Group on the 4th of September 2025, and while the note will be published on the Scottish Government website in due course, it was an opportunity for shared intelligence gathering, understanding where the sector considers they are underdeveloped and where there are opportunities for the Scottish Government to continue to support the growth of this key sector.
Daniel Johnson.
Can I echo the Cabinet Secretary's welcome to the Chair of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association before I ask my supplementary? It's welcome that the meeting was convened on the 5th of September. The Cabinet Secretary will know that the previous meeting to that was in March 2022, and certainly at the point that I was doing my research for this question, the Chair was still stated as Neil Gray. But we also know that, according to the government's own statistics, that the number of creative industries enterprises is lower than it was 10 years ago. So can I ask what the government is doing to increase that number? And might it be an idea to schedule these meetings more frequently than once every 3 years?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm very much in favour of meeting more regularly, and I made that clear to the creative sector. I think one of the areas where government can be helpful is in the ambition of internationalising Scotland's creative sector. So at our meeting we talked at some length about the network of Scottish Government offices internationally, about the more than 30 locations where Scottish Development International is cited, and the more than 1,400 global Scots around the world who can help promote the creative sector and the rest of Scotland's economy. And then, of course, there is the Brand Scotland initiative, which I chair, and brings together Scotland's public sector organisations that promote sectors such as that of the creative industries. And I've committed to them to make sure that we use all of these different routes to promote the creative sector internationally, as well as everything else that has been done domestically.
Supplementary, Paul McLennan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's vital we continue working to support, grow and realise the potential of Scotland's creative industry sector, including by Scotland's reputation internationally. Can the Cabinet Secretary say any more about the work to ensure Scotland's leading cultural reputation and valuable contribution to our economy?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think one of the areas where I have very high hopes is the potential for a Scottish Cultural Export Office working together with the Scottish Government offices internationally, the SDI network and the Global Scots right around the world. Scotland has a tremendous cultural offering, but I do think that one of the lessons both of the COVID experience and also Brexit is that there has been a significant challenge for younger performers wishing to tour more, wishing to have more international experience. I think we can and do more in that area, and that's why funding is being allocated to look into the opportunities for a cultural export office, which I know has been warmly welcomed by the likes of the Scottish Music Industry Association and others as a significant intervention that will boost the Scottish cultural sector internationally.
I call it question 3. Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it's taking to ensure freedom of expression is respected at cultural venues.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government is committed to ensuring that all communities in Scotland feel safe, feel valued and feel respected. Cultural venues are responsible for their own bookings and programming decisions, and neither the Scottish Government nor Creative Scotland have a role in this. We fully support individuals' right to freedom of expression, and we are clear that there is no place for any form of discrimination or prejudice in Scotland.
Alexander Stewart.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Recent campaigns by external groups to censor events run by Scottish cultural organisations has made it difficult to secure corporate sponsorship. The National Museum, for example, has suggested that ongoing activism is threatening to cut corporate sponsorship and has created an ever more challenging environment in which to operate. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that such attempts to censor different opinions are unacceptable? And what guarantees will he give to the sector to ensure that potential corporate sponsors will invest in the Scottish culture in the future?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I very much welcome the question and the tone of the question from Alexander Stewart. It is about corporate sponsorship, but it's also about philanthropy. And if it is the case that particular campaigning organisations, and there are a range, some of which are on subjects where I would have sympathy about the concerns of the day about a particular subject, but by intervening in the way that they do, undermine the potential either for corporate or for philanthropic giving, this is a matter of concern. And I have spoken about this with a range of organisations to try and better understand what can be done to build resilience into the culture sector. I would draw people's attention to an excellent article written by Ian Rankin on this subject. I think there is more that government can do. I do think that there is a role right across the political spectrum for us all to take the opportunity to acknowledge how important it is that corporate sponsorship is protected and in place, because the unintended consequences, to give just but one example, is that the loss of funding for the Edinburgh International Book Festival meant that children of deprived backgrounds might have been deprived of the opportunity to go to that fantastic world-class festival were it not for the Scottish Government who plugged the gap after that funding was withdrawn.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Thank you. And question 6, I call Murdo Fraser.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide further details of its position on making all future funding for arts organisations conditional on the applicant's commitment to protecting freedom of expression.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as Mr Fraser knows, I've spoken out loudly in favour of freedom of speech. I do so again here today, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to do that. Mr Fraser is also well aware of my defence of the arm's-length relationship between ministers and individual funding decisions for culture and the arts. This really matters for anybody who appreciates the importance of artistic freedom. I acknowledge that this will occasionally test this approach, but I value the principles and proportionality, given that everybody operates subject to the law.
Murdo Fraser.
Well, I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response, but it is frankly a bit of a cop-out to kick all this over to Creative Scotland, given the Scottish Government have just told another arm's-length organisation, Scottish Enterprise, it needs to revisit its support for defence contractors because they might have products that end up, for example, in the armed forces of Israel. So if the Scottish Government can do that with one arm's-length body, why can't it do it with another? And will the Cabinet Secretary therefore make it very clear to Creative Scotland that its grant should be conditional on the recipients of them upholding free speech, so we don't see any more nonsense like his colleague, the Deputy First Minister, being potentially banned from an arts venue in receipt of taxpayer funds?
Cabinet Secretary.
I simply point out to Mr Fraser, I do think there's a tension in standing up and avowing freedom of speech, but at the same time asking for government ministers to micromanage culture. That is not the job of the Cabinet Secretary for Culture. But I'm not walking away from a responsibility of using my voice, of saying that we do want to support a culture of free speech. In relation to the venue that he talks about, I know something about it. It's in my constituency, and I observe that Summerhall management have publicly asserted that Kate Forbes is free to attend the venue. But on the generality of the issue, I think it's absolutely right. We want to stand up for freedom of speech, but we also want to protect the arm's-length nature of management in culture and the arts. It is not for government ministers to get involved in micromanaging individual circumstances, but the generality holds true. Freedom of speech matters.
Question number 4, Ros McCall.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it's planning to make any changes to Historic Environment Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary.
The appointment process for a new chair of Historic Environment Scotland has been underway since May, and an appointment will be announced in due course. As one of our public bodies, HES is expected to regularly review its policies and priorities to ensure it is delivering maximum impacts for public investment, and as part of public service reform work, we've given greater flexibility to HES to allow increased investment into our most nationally significant historic places.
Ros McCall.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response, but it was recently revealed that directors at Historic Environment Scotland were awarded pay increases of up to 18%, at the same time as the organisation is facing a £3 million budget shortfall and has admitted to looking for further savings. So does the Cabinet Secretary believe that these increases are acceptable? And does he agree that taxpayers' money would be better used to preserve Scotland's historic sites rather than lining the pockets of senior staff?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I reiterate the point that I made a moment ago, because I think it's very significant, which is that changes are taking place in the management of Historic Environment Scotland, and I'll be happy to update Ros McCall and colleagues in due course. As she'll appreciate, there are matters that I cannot comment on at the present time, but I want to give her confidence that I'm seized of those matters in relation to Historic Environment Scotland. It's really important that the excellent work of HES across Scotland can continue with a new chair, and I look forward to being able to confirm progress on that shortly.
Supplementary, Bill Kidd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Thanks to the changes to the framework, Historic Environment Scotland is now able to invest every penny from its commercial income to protect our historic environment for future generations. Is there anything the Cabinet Secretary can say about how this work will enable Historic Environment Scotland to improve visitor experiences and preserve our heritage?
Cabinet Secretary.
Building on the greater financial freedoms provided in their revised framework agreement, Historic Environment Scotland's corporate plan for 2025 to 2028 will see the organisation contribute to the achievement of key national outcomes and deliver for Scotland. By 2028, Historic Environment Scotland aim to have increased direct expenditure on their assets by 15%, increased the number of people that they have trained by 10%, increased their contribution to Scotland's GDP by 10% from £1 billion to £1.1 billion, invested at least £40 million in local communities and have generated additional funding from non-government sources of at least 20% from £73.5 million to £87 million.
And supplementary, Neil Bibby.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I join the Cabinet Secretary and other members in welcoming the Chair of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association to the gallery. I understand Scottish ministers instructed officials to attend board meetings of Historic Environment Scotland back in May due to governance concerns. Given this, what assurances can the Cabinet Secretary give the public and the Chamber that HES will properly and robustly investigate claims that a director of HES hosted an exclusive private dinner at Edinburgh Castle in August?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I thank Neil Bibby for this question, and he knows that I am seized of the matter because I've spoken to him personally about it, as I have with some other members of the Constitution, External Affairs and Culture Committee. I would wish to give him confidence that there are changes taking place in Historic Environment Scotland, and I'll be happy to update him in due course. There will be a new chair of HES announced. I can't say more than that because there are a number of administrative hoops that need to be gone through. I have a very, very high level of confidence in that incoming chair's ability to deal with any issues that need to be looked into, where any follow-up interventions need to be taken, but also encouraging a new chair and anybody else that takes a role in Historic Environment Scotland, that they're doing so in an organisation which has delivered significantly, as I've outlined to Mr Kidd, and I look forward to being able to make an announcement shortly, and I hope it will give Mr Bibby the confidence that it is already given to me.
Question number 5, Evelyn Tweed.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions the Culture Secretary has had with ministerial colleagues regarding action to support gender equality in the arts and culture sector's workforce.
Cabinet Secretary.
We recognise that women remain underrepresented within the creative industries and are disproportionately in lower-level positions. The sector is known for unpredictable freelance work, making it difficult for women with caring responsibilities, health conditions or disabilities. And while employment law remains reserved to the UK Parliament, the Scottish Government is committed to Fair Work First, including taking action to tackle the gender pay gap across all sectors. We most recently set out actions towards gender equality across all portfolios in the Scottish Government's annual statement on gender policy coherence in June 2025.
Evelyn Tweed.
I thank the Culture Secretary for that response. The Equal Media and Culture Centre for Scotland highlights that women make up the majority of lower-paid and part-time roles in creative industries. Higher-paid decision-making and leadership roles are more likely to be filled by men. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to tackle this occupational segregation.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think it's a very important question and an important follow-up, and I wish to give Evelyn Tweed confidence that the work that has been conducted in government together with the sector is looking at all of these challenges. We want to make sure that people of all backgrounds, especially the majority of people in Scotland who are women, to have the fair crack of the whip in terms of the culture and arts sector and the leadership positions in it. I can point to a great many women who run some of our most important cultural institutions, and I would wish there to be many more.
And supplementary, Pam Gozo.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I would like to declare my interest as one of the proud authors of the Women Who Wouldn't Wished book. Presiding Officer, this government likes to bang on about its commitment to gender equality. However, Women Who Wouldn't Wished, a book which included essays from diverse women, including myself, was temporarily removed from the National Library of Scotland during the busiest time of the Fringe due to staff pressure. So, yes or no answer, does the Cabinet Secretary agree that banning books from feminist authors sends the wrong message to women who wish to work in the arts and culture sector?
Cabinet Secretary.
So, Presiding Officer, I've been asked a follow-up question about the approach of the Scottish Government to tackle occupational segregation, and
Cabinet Secretary, could you resume your seat for a second? I did note your look towards me during the supplementary question. The question on the Business Bulletin is to ask the Scottish Government what discussions the Culture Secretary has had with ministerial colleagues regarding action to support gender equality in the arts and culture sector's workforce. And I think that the Cabinet Secretary could perhaps find a way to, with that in mind, respond to the member's question.
Answer that question in reply to Evelyn Tweed in her question. I'd be happy to write to the member about the issue she raises, but I would echo the points that I was making. I would echo the points that I was making to her frontbench spokesman on the issue that it is.
Ms Gozo, please allow the Cabinet Secretary to respond. Thank you.
It's not the place of a Scottish Government Cabinet Secretary to micromanage the culture sector, which is why we have arm's-length relations with our funding organisations and our cultural organisations. The point that she has made is on the record, as is my commitment to freedom of speech.
Thank you. We move on to question number 7. Mark Griffin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when the Culture Secretary last met with Creative Scotland to discuss the future of Cumbernauld Theatre in light of reported concerns about its funding.
Cabinet Secretary.
I meet quarterly with the Chair and Chief Executive of Creative Scotland. We have discussed in depth the successful delivery of the multi-year funding programme, including how Creative Scotland is supporting organisations such as Cumbernauld Theatre. I also met the Chair of the Cumbernauld Theatre on the 26th of March, where we discussed the steps they were taking following their unsuccessful application for multi-year funding. The Chair of Cumbernauld Theatre wrote to me on the 10th of September, highlighting their current challenges, and I have now replied offering to meet to discuss their situation.
Mark Griffin.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Now, given the importance of Cumbernauld Theatre as a cultural heart of Cumbernauld now for over 60 years and the excellent work being done by the new leadership team, can I ask, beyond those meetings, what firm action the Scottish Government is taking to ensure that the theatre is able to continue to serve the people of Cumbernauld and wider Lanarkshire, following the decision by Creative Scotland to remove funding?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm very well aware of the issues relating to Cumbernauld Theatre, given the past meetings that I've had, the impending meetings that are taking place, but also the excellent representation it has had from my Cumbernauld and Kilsyth SNP MSP colleague, Jamie Hepburn. I look forward to meeting Cumbernauld Theatre shortly to better understand their funding concerns and plans to secure funding, given the decision by Creative Scotland on multi-annual year funding. Mr Griffin, I'm sure would be interested to know that it has been a subject of conversation between myself, the civil servants who are responsible in this policy area, and I will be taking up directly with both Cumbernauld Theatre and Creative Scotland.
And at question number 8, I call Michelle Thompson.
To ask the Scottish Government on what basis it will assess the contribution of Scotland's performing arts organisations in advance of the next budget.
Cabinet Secretary.
Government has a proud tradition of supporting our performing arts organisations, and we prepare for the next budget. We will assess their contribution through cultural, educational, economic and international lenses. Our national performing companies, now in their 19th year of direct funding, deliver against clear objectives covering excellence, reach, leadership and collaboration. And I recently met all 5 NPCs and was inspired by their work to ensure Scotland is celebrated globally as a creative nation. This evidence will guide our investment decisions to sustain a vibrant, inclusive cultural sector.
Michelle Thompson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response, and I completely agree about the calibre of our national performing companies. It is indeed excellent. However, I'm quite aware that one of the drivers of our Finance Committee is to assess fiscal sustainability, and that must also surely be a measure that should be applied to our national performing arts organisations. I would even go as far as to consider the GVA contribution of each of them, and if so, if the Cabinet Secretary agrees with that, because I was very struck by the very positive evidence from Alistair Mackey of the RSNO in last week's Culture Committee, would he see a role for the Finance Committee in focusing on fiscal sustainability vulnerability specifically.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I confirm to Michelle Thompson, I have found it very, very helpful, as I'm sure have members of the Chamber from all parties, to have an understanding of the GVA impact on certain parts of the cultural sector. So we had a recent report published in relation to the screen sector that pointed out that we are heading towards an industry worth over £1 billion by 2030, which is a remarkable success. In assessing applications to its multi-year funding programme, Creative Scotland used 6 criteria. They were quality and ambition, engagement, equalities, diversity and inclusion, environmental sustainability, fair work and international for those organisations whose proposals involved international activity. In addition, assessment was made of the financial health of applicant organisations. Spending decisions are scrutinised by parliamentary committees in line with their own processes and chosen areas of focus. But I know a number of cultural organisations are in the process of commissioning economic impact assessments and their GVA contribution to the Scottish economy, and I would encourage those that haven't yet made a decision in that area to follow the advice of Michelle Thompson on this question.
Thank you. I'll squeeze in a brief supplementary. Stephen Kerr.
Some of our national companies have been truly entrepreneurial. The RSNO is a very good example. They've been producing soundtracks for major Hollywood productions, and that's exactly the kind of financial responsibility we would want to see right across the sector. So can the Cabinet Secretary tell us what encouragement he will give to other national companies to follow that example, and will he commit that those who do show such enterprise, like the RSNO, will not be penalised when it comes to the allocation of public money that they still need to thrive?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, firstly, on praising for the RSNO, I join Mr Kerr, absolutely right. Not only are they doing what they're doing in terms of film soundtracks, they're also doing it for gaming soundtracks. And it's a huge business, and to know how many of these world-class productions, be they for the screen or for gamers, it really is very impressive. I'd like to give him confidence, given our national performing companies work really, really closely with one another. They are very keen to emulate one another with the enterprise attitude that he encourages us to take. He's also encouraged us to make sure that the money is in place. I am happy to say to him that I am very sympathetic to that. It's only a disappointment Mr Kerr didn't vote for that in the budget.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes portfolio questions on Constitution, External Affairs and Culture and Parliamentary Business. There will be a very short pause before we move on to the next item of business. Allow frontbench teams to quickly, please, change position. Thank you. Thank you. The next portfolio is Justice and Home Affairs, and at question number 1, I call Annie Wells.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what measures it's taken to address gang-related violence.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, partners on the Serious Organised Crime Task Force continue to use every means at their disposal to disrupt serious organised crime, including gang-related violence. In addition, the Scottish Crime Campus enhances collaboration between key partner organisations in disrupting serious organised crime and terrorism. The public should be reassured that Police Scotland continues to work with partners to disrupt such criminal activity, and these criminals show a complete disregard for the safety of the public, and it is incumbent on us all that they are stopped and held to account. And I would encourage anyone with relevant information to report it to Police Scotland or anonymously through Crime Stoppers.
Annie Wells.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, but given that Glasgow has historically experienced some of the highest levels of gang-related violence in Scotland, what additional targeted measures are being introduced in the city to address this issue and to support prevention and diversion programmes for young people at risk of gang involvement?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit is working with partners to deliver street guardians, and this is similar to the street pastors model being used to deploy youth workers and volunteers during early evening economy hours within Glasgow city centre. Workers undertake a capable guardianship role and have early intervention with young people to prevent violence from happening. This work includes Common Ground, which is a collective of partners who have secured a premise outside Central train station in Glasgow to utilise as a youth hub and support the work of street pastors through the provision of a safe space for young people and targeted engagement. This, of course, is underpinned by our broader programme of work, and if the member wishes more detail, I would be delighted to write to her.
Supplementary, Jackie Dunbar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The importance of reaching our young folk at risk of joining gangs at an early age cannot be underestimated. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what the Scottish Government is currently doing to support those organisations who work to help and support those most at risk of becoming involved in crime?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I hope to reassure members that the Scottish Government continues to tackle youth violence in all its form, and that is through education programmes, effective consequences for offences, appropriate police powers and sustained school and community engagement with young people. And this is backed by an investment of more than £6 million to implement the Violence Prevention Framework, which includes actions to address the carrying of weapons in and around schools. And of course the big focus of the Cashback for Communities programme, which is having additional investment, is indeed to really bear down into preventative work.
Question number 2, Alexander Burnett.
To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reports that 183 police stations need repairs, 177 contain asbestos and 4 contain reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the management of the Police Scotland estate, including assessment of the condition of buildings and statutory and general health and safety at work requirements, are an operational matter for the Chief Constable under the oversight of the Scottish Police Authority. We support Police Scotland's commitment to providing a safe environment for officers, staff and the public. In 2025-26, we increased capital funding to £70 million for investment in the estate, technology, fleet and body-worn video, and this will support Police Scotland to commence delivery of its estate's master plan, which will deliver a modern, fit-for-purpose estate that serves the needs of the workforce and our communities.
Alexander Burnett.
I'm afraid the Cabinet Secretary is not going to get away with the fact that her government is putting officers and staff at risk. I have a Freedom of Information request which shows that Police Scotland spent over £230,000 on just managing, not even removing, asbestos in police stations over the last 3 years. And the North East has the highest number of buildings with asbestos, with 25 riddled with it. Now, police officers are being forced to work in buildings which are not just substandard, but dangerous, as if being a police officer in Scotland is not dangerous enough. So will the Cabinet Secretary commit to properly funding Police Scotland and ensure that its buildings are fit for purpose and all asbestos is removed where it is safe to do so?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it's all very well for the member to argue for additional funding for Police Scotland after the budget has passed, because I do not recall either him or any member of his party coming to this chamber or during budget negotiations advocating for additional resources for Police Scotland. In fact, I think I may have been the only MSP that actively advocated for additional resources for Police Scotland. And indeed, I am pleased that due to Scottish Government commitments that we have provided almost £90
Cabinet
million.
Secretary, please resume your seat a second. I will not have this barracking from secondary positions. Please show courtesy and respect and listen to the Cabinet Secretary's response. Thank you very much indeed. Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Thank you, Presiding Officer. It is a matter of public record that this Government will provide almost £90 million in additional funding compared to the previous financial year, and that we have increased capital to £70 million. I should remind colleagues that under the Control of Asbestos Regulations 2012, responsibility for the control and management of asbestos in Scottish police stations rests with Police Scotland as the duty holder. But I, of course, discuss a range of matters with the Chief Constable and Police Scotland in and around their requirements for capital.
And supplementary, Katie Clark.
Greenock Police Station has not been properly maintained for many years and is earmarked for closure. Police Scotland's estate master plan also noted that Greenock needs a new station. Can the Cabinet Secretary give an update on the progress to delivering a new station for Greenock and confirm it will have a custody suite?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it is important that Police Scotland consider very carefully the location, in particular of custody suites, and I know that that is a matter that they have and continue to give serious consideration to. As I said in my earlier answer, the specific responsibilities in and around police stations rest at an operational level with the Chief Constable and Police Scotland, but I would be happy, after consulting with Police Scotland, to provide an update to Ms Clark.
Question number 3, Bob Doris.
Thank you, President Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support is available to women preparing for release from prison.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government provides funding to local authorities and third sector organisations to support women to prepare for release. We provide over £5 million a year to Upside, the National Voluntary Through Care Service, to support people leaving short-term sentences and periods of remand. This one-to-one support includes help to address issues such as access to housing, healthcare and social security payments, as well as longer-term support to help rebuild their lives and reintegrate into their communities. For women leaving long-term sentences, we centrally fund local authorities to provide statutory support through Justice Social Work.
Bob Doris.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The opportunity to develop skills needed for adjusting to life outside of prison is hugely important in delivering better outcomes. This is something the Lilly Centre in my constituency works very hard to deliver. Will the Cabinet Secretary join me in commending the efforts of the team at the Lilly Centre, and does she agree with me that investing in rehabilitation is crucial in tackling women reoffending?
Cabinet Secretary.
Absolutely, Presiding Officer. The Lilly Centre in Mr Doris's constituency and the Bella Centre in Dundee represent a real step change in the rehabilitation of women in custody. As you'd expect, I have visited both. These centres help women develop key life skills and a much greater degree of independence, and I commend the work of SPS and partners to help to give women in custody the best possible chance of a successful return to the community. And I also note that His Majesty Inspector of Prisons commended SPS's progress towards the vision for women in custody and identified a number of good practices in the report last year, including work on developing women's entrepreneurial skills.
A supplementary, Sharon Dowie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The numbers speak for themselves that we're not doing enough. Reconviction rates for women being discharged from custody have increased from 39% for the 2020-21 cohort to 45% for the 21-22 cohort, which is higher than the rate for men. There was a documentary in March about HMP Stirling where a female inmate said, "I don't want to be out, it's just safer in here." So how does the Government explain the huge increase in reconviction rates for women, and what are they doing to ensure women are safe when they leave prison?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it is important to recognise that the proportion of females in custody is disproportionately, significantly so, smaller than that for men. The member is correct to point to the greater vulnerability and the complexity of needs amongst many of women in our care, and that's why the investment that we have made in the new HMP Stirling, as well as the Bella Centre and Lilly Centre, are so important. But the crux of her question points to the fact that short-term custodial sentences are way less effective for rehabilitating both women and men, and that is why we need to all resolve to do more in terms of alternative to remand and alternatives to custody. Community payback orders have a great flexibility to provide tailor-made support for women and others.
Question number 4, Liam MacArthur.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government, in light of reports of concerns being raised in communities across Highlands and Islands in relation to land auctions involving potentially misleading advertising, what action it will take to ensure that people who believe they have been affected by such practices have recourse under Scots law, including access to legal representation and support.
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Presiding Officer. Any purchaser intending to buy property at an auction house should ensure that they have all the necessary information. Buyers can request certain information from the selling agent or undertake their own searches. Any concerns about auction houses not providing a full disclosure of the state of land or property should be reported to the local Trading Standards Office. Anyone who believes that they have been subjected to misleading advertising practices should contact Advice Direct Scotland to discuss their concerns. The Scottish Legal Aid Board provides information on nearest solicitors who offer help through legal aid or other advice providers.
Liam MacArthur.
Minister, for that response. Over the past year, misleading ads for land sales in Orkney and across the Highlands and Islands have caused concerns, both for buyers but also for the communities affected. I welcome steps taken by operators like Rightmove to review their listings and reinforce to sellers that any information advertised must be wholly accurate. As I've seen, however, unscrupulous sellers move on to find other avenues to exploit. Buyers must have confidence their rights will be protected, and communities deserve better than the misleading marketing of land for housing and development. So, will the Scottish Government take steps to raise public awareness of these scams, and will the Minister explore, perhaps with UK counterparts, ways to close existing loopholes and reinforce consumer protections?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yes, I note the concerns that the member has raised and happy to look into it on behalf of the member. I do note that previously the member has raised if it would be possible perhaps to have an amendment in the Land Reform Bill, and I do understand the Cabinet Secretary in charge of the bill would be happy to discuss this further with the member to identify concerns and appropriate means of dealing with this issue.
Question number 5, Sue Webber.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what actions it is taking to address the illegal use of off-road bikes, e-bikes and e-scooters.
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government provides Police Scotland and its partners in dealing with misuse of vehicles. I met with a number of MSPs in May to discuss their concerns with my colleague Minister Fairley, and action has since involved development of a campaign involving Crime Stoppers and Fearless, which got close to 7 million impressions. Enforcement is a matter for Police Scotland, and local policing teams are best placed to identify misuse and work to prevent future incidents. We have increased police funding to a record £1.62 billion this year to support the work that they do. Additionally, I understand that Police Scotland is undertaking a range of initiatives, including working with delivery companies, which I know it was an issue that the member has raised with me previously. We will continue to engage with the UK Government, which has reserved powers relating to off-road vehicles, including vehicle licensing.
Sue Webber.
For that response and acknowledge that I was at that meeting on the 29th of May. But antisocial behaviour is up 5% in the past year. E-bikes, e-scooters, they're playing a huge role in encouraging that. Trail bikes, souped-up e-bikes and e-scooters are tearing around the streets, often in a very dangerous manner, and are repeatedly being used to facilitate home break-ins, shoplifting and car thefts. My constituents are fed up. Meanwhile, the police are powerless. They don't give chase, and they lack the required resources to stop them. If the bikes are seized, they are more often than not handed back. Minister, enough is enough. Do you not agree that it's time we got tough on this sort of crime and provide the police with the real resources to tackle it?
Always to the Chair, Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I am aware that the member feels passionately, and I'm aware of the issues that are happening throughout Scotland. I do disagree that the Police Scotland are not doing anything. As I said, there is underlying work that has been going on for several months now, and I know they are keeping a review on their approach to illegal use of e-bikes and e-scooters. This complements the wider efforts to engage with communities and partners to prevent and tackle this issue, and I know through Glasgow's division collaboration with hospitals and also with food delivery companies. I will, of course, keep members informed as further information becomes available, but I would also be happy to facilitate discussions with Police Scotland where helpful.
And brief supplementary, Paul McLennan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And recognising that some powers such as vehicle licensing are reserved to UK Government, can the Minister provide an update on the engagement with UK Government in tackling antisocial behaviour, including vehicles?
Minister.
We continue to engage with the UK Government on reserve matters, including vehicle use, including vehicle licensing. While the UK Government has so far not responded positively to our proposal to extend the safety benefits of vehicle licensing to off-road vehicles, there are some encouraging developments. For example, the Product Regulation and Metrology Act will provide powers to take action against online marketplaces selling illegally modified vehicles. And we remain committed to working constructively with the UK Government, recognising that this is a shared challenge, and we continue to support enforcement of all existing regulations through our record levels of funding to the police.
Question number 6, Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what work has been undertaken to improve the rehabilitation of people who are subject to short prison sentences.
Cabinet Secretary.
Officer, as I said earlier to Mr Doris, the Upside service is aimed at supporting all individuals leaving custody after a short prison sentence or periods of remand. Upside is a service made of 8 experienced third sector organisations. All individuals leaving prison are eligible for support on release to help them resettle into the community and ensuring those leaving custody have their basic needs met on release, and that's absolutely critical for a safe transition back to the community. We are also taking forward work to improve support available to people leaving prison, including the development of a national standards for through care as introduced in the Bail and Release from Custody Act.
Paul Sweeney.
Thank the Minister for her response. I visited Barlinnie Prison last month, and the staff there were quite clear that short prison sentences are not having the benefits and rehabilitation that they would like to see, and that does need to be improvement in this area. One case was cited of a young man who had been released after a short sentence and was back in prison because he didn't know how to pay rent to his landlord, and then was so humiliated by it that he ran away and then ended up back on drugs and in a fight. So clearly that case was a failure, and it's resulted in a bad outcome for that person and for society. Can the Minister undertake to review the efficacy of short sentencing in each case where this doesn't work? We can address why it hasn't worked and deal with that.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, we await the independent deliberations from the Sentencing and Penal Commission, and there are, as the member has articulated, a raft of evidence, both at an individual level and an empirical evidence, that speaks to the inefficiency of short-term sentences. We understand that on a case-by-case basis they are at times necessary, but the facts are that they are far less effective in setting folk on the right path in comparison to an alternative to custody. So our focus has to be on building up alternative to custodies, and of course community sentencing is also on the increase. In terms of the individual issue that he raises in relation to an individual, I would like to highlight that the support provided by Upside begins in custody up to 12 weeks prior to release, where that's possible, and it's also underpinned by over £5 million of funding per annum, and that was an increase of nearly £2 million.
Supplementary, Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Government released 789 prisoners early from their short sentences last summer and early this year in an attempt to ease overcrowding and without consideration of their individual rehabilitation journeys. Now, 1 in 10 of that first tranche were back behind bars within weeks, so it begs a question. What analysis of each prisoner's stage of rehabilitation did the Government do before these releases to ensure that the rehabilitation was not being terminated early?
Cabinet Secretary.
So, Presiding Officer, the member is referring to the early emergency release that commenced, and what that demonstrated that there was a return to custody rate of 12 to 13%, which is way lower than the reconviction rate for those who are released in general from short-term custodial sentences, and it is imperative to address issues with short-term sentences in the longer run. But if I can also point the member to, in terms of the specifics of that scheme, there was extensive planning and preparation to implement that scheme that involved third sector and statutory organisations. So good planning for any release, whether it's emergency or otherwise, is the backbone of reducing that return rate. It's the preparation for release, whether it's under standard or different arrangements. And I'd also just quickly highlight that there's also the Governor's veto as well as statutory exclusions from that scheme.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Question number 7, Maggie Chapman.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on any discussions it has had with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service about role expansion for firefighters.
Minister.
Presiding Officer, modernisation of the Scottish Fire Rescue Service, including broadening the role of firefighters, remains an ambition for this government. I recognise there is potential for firefighters to do more to protect communities through a broadened role, and I'm aware of the outline agreement between SFRS and the Fire Brigades Union that is dependent on additional funding. Although the proposal so far has been unaffordable, I regularly meet with the SFRS Chair and Chief Officer and will continue to work closely with them in considering future budgets in the context of delivering on public sector reform.
Maggie Chapman.
2 years ago, the FBU published Firestorm, a report into the future of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, which said clearly of role expansion, firefighters are willing to take on additional responsibilities, like emergency medical response and terrorist activity response. And it could be transformational for our emergency services, saving money and time elsewhere and benefiting other public services. But it has to be supported with proper training and sustained investment. There are already pressures on existing training provision. There are significant concerns about job security, staffing levels and capacity, and response times. How can firefighters and the communities they keep safe have confidence that the necessary funding, training and equipment will be providing for existing services and any future role expansion?
Sorry, Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As I said in my opening comments, it is an ambition for the Government to broaden the role of firefighters. The Scottish Government is currently conducting a spending review which will set indicative budgets for the next 3 years for resource and also 4 years for capital. And in the context of the spending review, I know that the Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Home Affairs met with the SFRS Chair and Chief Officer, and the emergency medical response element of the broad role was discussed. Since 2017 to 18, there have been substantial year-on-year increases in funding to support SFRS, and the current annual budget is over £97 million higher than the equivalent budget in 2017 to 18.
Brief supplementary, Jackie Bailey.
The downgrading of 24/7 cover at Helensburgh Fire Station to an on-call evening and weekend system relies on the recruitment of retained firefighters. Does the Minister understand that there are not enough retained firefighters to cover the existing shifts at fire stations in Helensburgh and Lomond, and does she therefore believe that the new proposals to rely on this model represent an increased risk to my local community?
Minister.
Firstly, I need to say to Jackie Bailey, as I said in the last time we were in the chamber discussing this, no decisions on the consultation have been made yet. I know the consultation for the service delivery review closed on the 16th of September. The emergencies that SFRS responds to have changed significantly over the years. An example, dwelling fires have reduced by over 20% in 2013. So I know, and I have a commitment from the SFRS, that they will now, an independent review will go into the consultation before any decision is made, and when any decision is made, it will be rolled out over a period of 5 years.
And brief supplementary, Rachel Hamilton.
Presiding Officer, I, alongside thousands of local residents, responded to the consultation on the future of Hoyk Fire Station to express our concerns that these proposals would undoubtedly put people at risk, as Jackie Bailey says. These presentations are due to be put in front of SFRS Board for final decision mid-December 2025. Can the Minister confirm that any decision regarding the future of Hoyk Fire Station will not go against the clear wishes of the community?
Minister.
Thank you. As I said, no decisions have been made regarding that. I am not going to comment on, I know there were 23 options in the consultation, and I will not be commenting on individual points of that consultation, but I do appreciate and I do trust that the SFRS will follow the correct procedure in this consultation.
And I can squeeze in question 8 if I get brief questions and answers to match. Claire Baker.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government how it is working with authorities in Mid-Scotland and Fife to address antisocial behaviour.
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I recognise the impact of antisocial behaviour can have on local communities in all areas of Scotland. That is why we have increased police funding to a record £1.62 billion this year, and funding to local governments have increased in real terms by 5.5%. Local authorities and Police Scotland have a range of options and powers available for preventing and tackling antisocial behaviour, taking local needs into account. Moreover, since 2008, our Cashback for Communities programme has provided £154 million to support young people who are most at risk of being involved in violence, antisocial behaviour and crime, and the most recent Cashback bidding round has just closed.
Claire Baker.
Thank you. Fife Council had to shell out a repair bill of close to £900,000 for 2,856 incidents of vandalism to public buildings and parks between 2022 and 2024. And last year, a new play park in Leavenmouth had to close less than 6 months later after being vandalised, with a repair bill to the council of over thousands. So what is the Scottish Government doing to better support local authorities and police and ensure they have adequate resources not only to meet these bills resulting from these incidents, but also to actively reduce them?
Minister, briefly.
Thank you. I recognise the impact of this behaviour has on communities and on local authorities as well. We will continue to support local authorities and the police to work in multi-agency partnerships and with communities and businesses to prevent and to tackle antisocial behaviour. It is a complex issue. We know this is brought up time and time again, but the Scottish Government are committed to tackling this type of antisocial behaviour.
And very brief supplementary, Willie Rennie.
I want the Minister to know that even in relatively peaceful North East Fife, antisocial behaviour affects almost every single community. And I want the Minister to take that back in our budget discussions about resources for councils, for housing associations and for the police, because people are at their wits' end with some of this behaviour.
Minister.
Thank you. I am, and I will take that comments on board with my discussions, but I am also aware of some really good practice in Fife and Mid-Scotland, such as the increased patrols in Stirling city centre, and also good practice in responding to antisocial behaviour involving retailers in Stirling, which was also highlighted at the Independent Working Group on Antisocial Behaviour. I have visited that social enterprise in Stirling, and they do incredible work, so I think it is a place which we could take guidance from to how we tackle antisocial behaviour.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes portfolio questions on Justice and Home Affairs. There will be a short pause before we move on to the next item of business. Thank you.